most, both, it's both the most, but in both. Somehow that makes sense. Hey, it's me, BEEJ, and I'm back on BookTube. So this video is all about where I've been and the books and YouTubers who got me through it. But first, look at this cute little video that Brett made. Alright, so it's been a while, and here's the thing. For the past 14 months, I've been dealing with untreated Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease that targets the thyroid, and the thyroid affects like everything else. So the short version is that if you look back over my videos of the past year or so, you will see a pretty steady decline in energy. And that's the bulk of it, right? Like having absolutely no energy to do anything, obviously to not be here and film. But it also came with some side effects of like sleeping to 15 hours a day, fatigue, chronic pain, and like more than my fair share of mentee Bs, which is mental breakdowns for those of you who are mentally well, which like weird flex, but okay. The long version includes how I started this Hashimoto's journey by trying to see only or mostly holistic practitioners, and while I am still a huge advocate for treating the whole patient and not just individual symptoms, I would not recommend some of the loonies that I went to see over this past year. At one point, I was getting acupuncture twice a week until my acupuncturist started bloodletting, which is 1,000 times more painful than you'd think it would be. I saw a functional medicine doctor who balances holistic medicine and traditional Western medicine until they had me on over 15 supplements at one time, and everything was making me sick. At one point I said, why should I even bother eating? And they were like, exactly. So stop seeing them. But the cherry on top was when I saw a very well-branded Eastern medicine doctor who archetyped me as a water yin problem-solving turtle whose ideal diet actually is a fruitarian, but specifically only berries and ground fruits because turtles can't reach trees. Anyway, I did go back to traditional Western medicine, got me a fancy-ass prescription, and my blood work pretty soon should determine whether it's working or not, even though I think that me being here currently in this chair is proof enough that I feel good enough to be here, which is good news. But what does that mean for us? You and me, this parasocial relationship we have here on YouTube. It means that I have at least 6 months of books to tell you about, and I'm gonna. But first I have to give some deep and sincere gratitude to some of the BookTube accounts that really kept me going through the dark days of 2023, which was like all of them. First and foremost, I have to thank Natalie at the WEIRDO Book Club, and I'll link her channel below and the other two I'm going to mention here in a minute, because her book rant reviews have been everything for me this past year. Specifically, her review on Haunting Adeline is 100% the funniest video I've ever seen on YouTube. Like, that is not a hyperbole. It is. I have never laughed so hard during a YouTube video ever. It's also the length of a feature film, by the way, and I have watched it so many times this year, and it has made me laugh to the point of crying every single time. She is hilarious. Her humor is a mixture of like perfect deadpan, well-timed sarcasm, like so much editing, so much work goes into her videos, and also the ability to create an inside joke within the timing of one video. 5 stars. Five stars. I also want to shout out Reads with Rachel, because she engages with books in a pretty critical way, but also she engages with authors in a pretty critical way, and I do appreciate that lens. She's able to condense a lot of the bookish drama into the most necessary and action-based details. But she's also my hero for going head-to-head against the raging lunatics at Moms for Liberty in our shared state. She's a thoughtful reader, an engaged parent who encourages reading and free thinking, and shows a lot of courage for continuing this fight for her kids as well as all readers in this state. And finally, I want to shout out My Name is Marinez, because she engages with books and the book community in such a thoughtful, intelligent, and kind way. Marinez is where I start on Book Talk when I want to get like the full scoop of the Book Talk drama, but it's also where I stay to get a really nuanced and researched take on any books or authors that are causing harm or might be problematic, and why that matters. Because the long and short of it is, I'm a white woman, so learning how to be in community with others is something that I'll be learning how to do for the rest of my life. And books as art as entertainment, as consumer products, as representations of the current cultural zeitgeist. They're my favorite hobby. So of course I want to be engaging in my favorite hobby in a way that is inclusive and builds community with others. Like that's the whole point. That's why I'm on social media, is to do that. And so part of that is learning how to decenter myself, my own experience, and decenter whiteness, and to care when books, authors, or publishers cause harm to other people. So that's why things like the St. Martin's Press boycott matters. But what I appreciate is that she brings readers in while educating and providing thoughtful analyses of books. And I spent many hours this year learning more from her. So 2023 was not the best reading year for me. It wasn't the best anything year, really. It was in fact the hardest year of my life. And it was 29. Doesn't that suck? It's supposed to be like the pinnacle almost. Of what? That's stupid. I don't believe that, and I certainly don't now. I read a lot of books. So it wasn't that I had a whole book slumpy year. I read a lot of books. I read 188 was like my end of year tally. So a lot of books. They were not all good books. They were not the best books. And they were not all new books, because I did have to do a lot of rereading last year because the old OS was lagging through most of last year. But I did do a lot of buddy reading with my book bestie. And what that looked like was mostly just me thrusting upon her my favorite books and book series and just like obsessing about them until she read them, and then I could like sort of live vicariously through her as she experienced them for the first time, which was a really fun experience for both of us, I think. So I just want to call out some of the major series that just really did it for me this past year. Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller. The first book in the series was published in 2017 by Fievel and Friends, which is an imprint of Macmillan. I love this series. I always say that this is my favorite series that younger me would have absolutely loved as a teenager or preteen. It's a YA fantasy adventure that follows Alosa, who's a pirate captain and commands an almost entirely woman-led crew, and she goes on an undercover quest for her father, the Pirate King. So around May of last year, I learned that in November of last year, Levenseller would be releasing a continuation of the completed duology called Vengeance of the Pirate Queen, which are all of my favorite words. And I cried so hard, like happy tears, that I gave myself a migraine. Book came out in November. I read it the day it came out. I loved it. So this book, the third book, Vengeance of the Pirate Queen, follows a different main character, Serinda, who works as the assassin to the Pirate Queen. So it follows her as she's sent on a mission to captain her own crew and navigate new waters. I loved this book. Loved it. It has all the same fun and adventure and like piracy as the first two books. Like at one point there's a sea monster that they have to battle. Like I ate it up. I love pirate books. But this book also actually goes pretty hard into emotional and character depth that the first two books didn't. So the first two books, they weren't superficial. They did have character depth and a lot of emotions like to work through. But a bulk of this book is Serinda's emotional journey and working through her past that does have a lot of trauma. So I would recommend checking the content and trigger warnings for this book. Highly recommend. I loved it, but it does get pretty hard. So check the warnings, but I recommend it. Havoc at Prescott High by C.M. Stunich. The first book of this series was self-published in 2019. Okay, so I have mentioned this series a lot, and I won't stop. I love this series. This is an incredibly dense, incredibly dark, Y2/RH revenge-based romance series. And before I continue, I want to make a quick note on RH. I understand and support the principle of changing our nomenclature around what is currently referred to as reverse harem or RH. I support the name change. However, what I've seen either proposed or just what I've seen being done is just an interchanging between the term RH with Y2s. And I do disagree with that because I think that there is a distinct nuance between Y2s, what is currently known as RH, and polyamory. The way that I see it, or the way that I have seen it done in the books that I've read, is that in a Y2's romance, you have multiple love interests. But those love interests do not overlap or interfere with each other. So they could be strangers or they could be friends, but they are not in a group dynamic. They are just 5 unique and separate individual romantic relationships. Zero group dynamic. Polyamory, it's an all group dynamic because all of the multiple love interests are involved with each other. So there are multiple dynamics at play, the individual relationships as well as the centralized group, as well as all of the other love interests with each other. In what is currently known as an RH, it's kind of in the middle. There is an individual character and a centralized romantic relationship. So even though there are multiple love interests, they are all in a group unit with the love interest. So they are not strangers, but they are not all dating each other either. They are all in a collective group romance with the one character. So anyway, we all just have to find a new name. I don't have any good ideas. I just think we should find a new name. Okay, so back to this book series. This is a 5-book revenge series with 5 male love interests, and it follows Bernadette, who calls upon the help of a local gang, Havoc, to help her exact her revenge against multiple people who have wronged her. So already, I'm in because I love a revenge plot. But as the books progress, you discover that Bernadette's personal revenge is actually part of a much larger web that affects like communities of people. So it not only helps us as readers stay invested in what is such a very long and intense vendetta, but it also like gives it that much more satisfaction when we attempt to see justice served against those individuals / systems. So before I give any details about this series, I want to say major trigger and content warnings. It's all trigger warnings, like the whole series, and also all of the warnings, all of them. That includes my synopsis. So my synopsis will include rape of a minor, suicide, police brutality, sexual assault, and pedophilia. So proceed with caution. So the premise of the book is, of course, Bernie calling on the help of this local gang to help her exact her revenge. But the premise is, of course, who the revenge is against and why. So even just this premise, though, is going to be full of content warnings and trauma. So right at the beginning of the book, we learned that Bernadette's older sister, Penelope, has died by suicide, which was brought on by being raped multiple times by their stepfather, who is the cop. It turns out that Bernadette knew that they were in an unsafe situation and tried to seek help from what would be her support system. So she did report this to the school, but that was just exploited. She uncovered that her principal and school nurse were working to exploit the vulnerable girls at their school for like cam girl work and really nasty stuff. That didn't help. So she told their mother. That made it worse. She told CPS. They got placed into a foster care system only to discover that the foster family they were placed with was actually part of a known pedophilia ring. The whole point of all of that, of just like trauma dumping, is that every person that she tried to seek help from ended up exploiting her further and kind of making their situation that much worse. And it ultimately led to Penelope's sister's death. So that is the very beginning. That's the premise of the book. That's where we're starting from. And so the hit list includes the foster brother, the principal, the best friend, the stepfather, and the mother, her mother. Now, like I said, these are all individual characters in the book. Like the best friend, the principal, the foster brother, the stepfather, the mother. But because they're all so connected to corruption and corrupt systems, that the vengeance itself actually becomes, over time, like a targeted attack on those systems, which I can totally get behind. This book and its characters are hella feminist, anti-billionaire, anti-cop, critical of the foster care system, and critical of the inequity of funds that go into public schools. So all things I can super champion. But I think what I like most about this book series is that it is extraordinarily violent. So I think that as a book community, we have become like super chill with talking about the smut that we consume. And like, honestly, good on us, right? Like, I love that for us. But it is much less normalized to like hear someone talk about just like the satisfying violence in a book. And that's fine. I don't think that violence should be normalized in real life, obviously. And I don't think that everyone should like violent books. Like, this is not a moral conversation. This is a preference conversation. Because I prefer violence in my books. I do. I like it. If I'm reading a fantasy adventure, I want the action. Like, I want the battles. I want death. I want it to mean something when they're fighting for their lives. I want there to be like an injury that impairs them for like the rest of their journey, especially when it's a hypersexual, like super dark, gritty series like this. I want there to be violence. That's part of it. I do prefer romance when it's paired with an equal amount of violence. And this book series, I think, delivers on that balance perfectly. This book is aggressively violent and it is aggressively satisfying. So this book series is just a mashup of vengeance and violence and sex, and C.M. Stunich is the queen of smut. Once Upon a Broken Heart. This was published in 2021 by Flatiron Books, which is an imprint of Macmillan. This book trilogy, which I read in a blitz in October and then immediately reread again 6 days later, is getting its own book rant review. Like a whole video is required to talk about this book series, what it did to me, and what I assume it's done to the world. Or just to the book community. I just have to pull my thoughts together because this book series became my entire personality for like a month. It's all I could think about. It's all I could talk about. Like, I changed my phone background to character art from this series. And I know to you total strangers on the internet that means nothing. But two things. One, I am not a character art girly. I have been at best indifferent to character art from every other fandom I've ever encountered ever. I have never collected fan art. I've never purchased fan art. I give away the fan art that comes in the book boxes. I don't care about it. It's neat when it's in the end pages. I'm indifferent at best. Second, I have had the same phone background since 2013. That's not a hyperbole. It's the same picture that I have moved from every phone I've ever had since 2013. It's a zoomed in screenshot of a location from a video game that I played in 2007. I don't change my phone background. And yet, when I was reading this book, I was like, I can't not see these two characters every time I reach for my phone for the foreseeable future. And here we are. This series affected me. So I will be talking about this book and this book series, and I will be talking about the crushing, overwhelming, despairing disappointment that was the third book and how I'm still emotionally recovering from it. Just know for now that I did read it and that the first two books of this series gave me the serotonin that my brain was not producing on its own that I desperately needed to get me through the last 2 months of last year. The Twisted Love series by Anna Huang. So these were published in 2021 by Bloom Books, which is an imprint of Source Books, which is an independent publishing house. So I have talked about this series before, and so this series, rereading this, was another buddy reread with my book bestie, and this is how we chose to close out the year, is by reading this series. So basically, this is a dark-ish romance series that takes place in DC and follows 4 different women and their dudes over a series of years. Each book follows a different trope or set of tropes. And so these are really tropey books. And I've talked before about the tropification of books and how like marketing is just like listing tropes for books, and whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. But these books are super tropey, but why I think they kind of work is that the plots feel very built around the trope instead of sprinkling in the trope just because and having it like not matter. So I don't know Anna Huang's writing process. I don't know if she did build her books around her tropes, but it feels that way, which means that the tropes themselves feel purposeful. So it just feels more substantive than, for example, like in Assistant to the Villain, there's like a line where there's like the one bed trope and then it literally doesn't matter by the next sentence. That to me is a dumb use of tropification. But these books, like I said, feel like they were built around the trope, so they feel like they're really central to the plot because they are. The first book in this series is Twisted Love, and in my opinion, this book is objectively the weakest out of the 4. This is kind of a grumpy sunshine in its most basic form about a perpetually happy girl with a traumatic past named Ava and the stoic guy who falls for her. This book was just kind of meh to me because the depth of this book came from Ava's traumatic past, and therefore the entire plot that takes place in present day feels pretty predictable. So it's just kind of whatever. So I think that this is both grumpy sunshine in its most basic form and its most like extreme and exaggerated form of like there's not a lot of else going on in the plot, so Huang just kind of like cranks up the grumpy sunshine to its most extreme forms, so makes the plot feel pretty shallow and predictable. But if you like grumpy sunshine, The second book, Twisted Games, is like a shot-for-shot retelling of Princess Diaries 2, and I don't hate it. So this follows Bridget, who is a princess to a tiny European country who is suddenly put in the position where she has to become queen. But the trope that this book follows is the bodyguard trope. So the love interest is the bodyguard. She has to do like all the same things. She faces all the same challenges that Mia Thermopolis faces in Princess Diaries 2. She has to fight like the archaic marriage laws. She has someone trying to steal the throne, etc., etc. There are even quotes and homages to Princess Diaries 2 in this book, like frequently actually. And to me that's like the very best of fan fiction, and I don't say that to disparage the writing. I don't think fan fiction is an insult anyway, but I think like when something pays homage to its source material really well, I think that's what this book is. I don't think this book is pretending like if I just pretend no one will notice. Like it's very obvious what it is, and what it is fun. The third book, Twisted Hate, is like your classic enemies to lovers setup with a pit stop at enemies with benefits. And I think Anna Huang does a nice job of pairing up two characters who are like such mirror images to each other that what they hate in each other is actually what they really hate about themselves. So this book builds tension really nicely, and in my opinion has the best smut out of the four. So this book follows Jules, who is like a wild girl with a rough past who is just about to turn the corner in her life and kind of have everything that she's been working for pay off. So she's just about to pass the bar and start working for a prestigious law firm. And the love interest, Josh, works in an emergency room, and he's as a doctor, and he's in his last year of residency. So they both have really high stress jobs, not a lot of downtime, no room for drama, just like a mutual loathing of each other and a similar belief in sex as a form of stress relief, until her past starts to catch up with her. Dun dun dun. And the fourth book is Twisted Lies, and this book follows Stella, a social media influencer who is plagued by a stalker. The love interest is the CEO of a security company who like needs arm candy to attend like high society events in order to engage more clients. So naturally they would both benefit from a fake dating situation, and they do. This book is also just kind of meh to me because the main male character feels like a rinse and repeat from the first book. He's just like stoic and brooding and rich, but I do appreciate the anxiety rep in this book. I think it's done well. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what constitutes like dark romance or like where that line is. I think that there are definitely really dark moments and elements in this book. 1000% check the content warnings before this series. Like definitely do that. They can get violent and dark at times, but I don't know if they would be considered dark romance, or maybe I'm like very off base and maybe like my baseline is just so far into dark romance that like I've lost the plot. Valid theory. If there's torture, I guess that's probably dark romance. There's torture in one part. Don't listen to me. These are dark romance. As I'm saying this, I have officially talked myself into these are dark romance books. These are not fluffy contemporary. These are dark romance. Look, all I know is that my book bestie and I read these series like throughout December, and especially during like the Christmas doldrums between Christmas and New Year's, when like you don't know what time it is and you haven't eaten a vegetable in 4 days. And if you're looking for, I think, tropes done well, I think that this book series will do it. Just check the content warnings. So that's where I've been in 2023. And I can't say that I'm 100% back to normal either. Honestly, it's going to take a while to get my mind and my energy and my life back. But I can say that it does feel really good to be sitting here right now talking to you about books. And there's more to come. I'm just about to film, if like this is a storm outside, but I might just film it anyway. But I'm about to film my 2023 book superlatives, and I have my 2024 reading goals, so many more book rants, book raves and reviews, and even a TBR game that I like shamelessly stole from another booktuber with credit that I've been using pretty successfully for the past few months. Like I never thought I would be a TBR game girly, but here we are. So there's good stuff to come. But in the meantime, tell me what you've been reading. What was your most bingeable book of 2023? And if you're shy and you don't know what to say or comment, then just leave a little snowflake and say hi. So thank you so much. Thank you for sticking around in my absence. Thanks for still being here. And thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if you loved it, hit subscribe. So take care. And as always, happy reading.